There are moments that divide your life into a before and an after. A single, shattering instant where the world you knew cracks open and a new, terrifying one bleeds through. For me, that moment wasn't the pain. It was the silence that followed my father's voice. "Walk it off. Stop being a baby." The words, sharp and familiar, landed harder than the pavement. I was 17, and I lay on the rough, oil-stained concrete of our driveway, the world tilted at a nauseating angle. The scent of charcoal and grilled meat from my brother Kyle's 18th birthday party hung in the humid air, a cruel reminder of the normalcy that had just been obliterated. One minute, I was on a ladder, stringing up the last of the happy birthday banners because Mom had insisted it make the backyard look more festive. The next, the rusty rung under my foot gave way with a sound like a gunshot. A sickening lurch, a blur of sky and ground, and then an impact that sent a white-hot jolt up my spine, leaving me breathless and broken on the ground. I couldn't move. Not my legs. It was as if the connection between my brain and the lower half of my body had been severed. A terrifying, staticky numbness was all that remained, punctuated by a deep, throbbing agony in my back. "Get up, Maya. You're embarrassing yourself." My father's voice boomed again, closer now. He stood over me, his shadow blocking the sun. He held a burger in one hand, a look of profound annoyance on his face. He wasn't worried. He was inconvenienced. "You're making a scene. It's your brother's day." Tears of pain and frustration welled in my eyes. "Dad, I can't feel my legs." He scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You just had the wind knocked out of you. Walk it off." From behind him, my brother Kyle smirked, his phone held up, no doubt recording my humiliation for his social media. "Nice dive, Klutz. You ruined the banner." My mother appeared then, wringing her hands on a napkin. "Oh, Maya, for heaven's sake. Look at the ladder. I told your father to fix that thing. Now you've gone and ruined Kyle's birthday. Can you just get up, please? The cake is about to be served." Their voices swirled around me, a vortex of dismissal and blame. The pain was a distant second to the profound isolation of that moment. They were a united front, a family of three looking down at the fourth, who was clearly failing to perform her role. I was the clumsy one, the dramatic one, the one who always found a way to make things about me. That was the narrative they had built for me, and I was, once again, living down to their expectations. I tried to push myself up, to prove them wrong, to be the tough girl my father always demanded. But my arms buckled, and a searing pain, like a lightning bolt, shot from the base of my spine down through my deadened legs. A whimper escaped my lips. "That's it," my father said, his patience gone. He reached down, not to gently help, but to grab me under the arms and haul me upright. "On your feet." The moment he pulled, the world exploded in a supernova of white. I screamed. A raw, guttural sound I didn't know I was capable of. It was a sound that finally cut through the party chatter, silencing the guests. That scream was what saved me. A woman, a neighbor I barely knew who was also a paramedic, came rushing over. "Don't move her," she commanded, her voice cutting through my father's bluster. She knelt beside me, her eyes professional and calm. "My name is Sarah. Can you tell me where it hurts, sweetie?" "My back," I gasped. "My legs. I can't feel them." Her hands were gentle as she performed a quick assessment. She asked me to wiggle my toes. Nothing. She ran a key along the sole of my foot. I felt nothing but a vague, faraway pressure, as if through layers of wool. Her calm demeanor shifted. A grim seriousness settled on her face. She looked up at my father, who was now red-faced and sputtering about overreactions. "Sir, your daughter has a possible spinal injury. She is not moving her legs. This is a critical situation." "Don't be ridiculous," my father laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "She's fine. She's always been a hypochondriac." The paramedic, Sarah, ignored him. She keyed the radio on her shoulder, her voice clear and urgent. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I have a 17-year-old female fall from approximately 10 feet, suspected spinal cord injury. Patient is non-ambulatory, loss of sensation in lower extremities. I need an ambulance at 1847 Maple Drive, Stat. And, dispatch, I am requesting police backup to the scene. The family is being obstructive. The world seemed to hold its breath. The words police backup hung in the air, a tangible, shocking thing. My mother gasped. Kyle lowered his phone, the smirk finally wiped from his face. My father stood frozen, the burger forgotten in his hand, his face a confused mask of anger and dawning fear. The siren in the distance was a promise and a threat. The before was over. The after had begun. The ambulance ride was a blur of controlled chaos and overwhelming noise. The siren's wail, the crackle of the radio, the paramedic's calm, steady voice in my ear. But the noise outside couldn't penetrate the silent, screaming terror inside me. The numbness in my legs was a void, an absence more frightening than any pain. At the hospital, the world became a series of stark, bright images. The cold, hard gurney. The concerned faces of nurses and doctors, their questions sharp and efficient. Can you feel this? Squeeze my hand. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain level? I answered in a monotone, my mind fixated on one thing, the void where my legs should be. My parents were allowed into the ER bay after what felt like an eternity. They looked smaller here, out of their element. My father's bluster had deflated into a sullen, confused silence. My mother fluttered around, trying to straighten my gown, her movements frantic and useless. The doctor says they need to do an MRI, she said, her voice too bright. Just to be sure everything's okay. It's probably just a bad bruise, honey. You've always been so sensitive to pain. I turned my head away from her, staring at the sterile, white wall. Her words, once a constant, low-grade irritant, now felt like a betrayal of cosmic proportions. My body was screaming a truth that she refused to hear. The MRI machine was a tunnel into my own fear. The technician warned me it would be loud, but nothing prepared me for the cacophony, the jackhammering, the rhythmic banging, the alien sounds that vibrated through my very bones. Lying perfectly still in that narrow tube, I was alone with the reality of my body. I tried to send commands to my toes. Move. Twitch. Anything. But the signals vanished into the static, lost in the space between my mind and my limbs. I cried then, silent tears that rolled down my temples and pooled in my ears, because no one could see or hear me break down in the roaring dark. When they wheeled me back to the room, the atmosphere had shifted. The doctor's casual professionalism was gone, replaced by a grave intensity. A new doctor, an older man with kind eyes and a neurosurgery badge, was waiting with my parents. My father was pacing again, but this time it was fueled by anxiety, not anger. Ms. Evans, the neurosurgeon said, directing his attention to me, which I appreciated. We've reviewed your MRI. You have a severe injury. A burst fracture of your L1 vertebra. Pieces of the bone have been pushed backward into your spinal canal, compressing the cord. This is what is causing your loss of sensation and movement. The medical terms were cold and clinical, but their meaning was brutally clear. Something was broken. Something was pressing on my spine. I was paralyzed. My mother let out a small, choked cry. But she can walk, right? With therapy? This is just temporary, doctor. The doctor's face was a roadmap of pity. It's too early to make any definitive prognosis. The swelling needs to go down before we can fully assess the damage. However, the compression is significant. We need to take you into surgery immediately to decompress the spinal cord and stabilize the spine. The goal is to prevent further damage and give the nerves the best possible chance to recover. Surgery, my father barked, finding his voice. What are the risks? Who's the best surgeon? I want the best. Sir, the doctor said, his tone firm but patient. I am the head of neurosurgery. And the greatest risk right now is inaction. Every minute that cord is compressed reduces the potential for recovery. While my parents were bombarding the doctor with questions about success rates and recovery timelines, a police officer, a woman with a steady gaze and a calm presence, entered the room. Sarah, the paramedic, had done her job well. "Mr. and Mrs. Evans?" the officer said. "I'm Officer Miller. I need to speak with you separately about the circumstances of your daughter's injury." My father puffed up, ready for a fight. "What is this? We're in the middle of a medical crisis. The nature of the injury and the reported obstruction of emergency medical care requires us to open an investigation," Officer Miller stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "It's standard procedure in cases of this nature involving a minor." The color drained from my parents' faces. The reality of the situation was expanding, reaching beyond the hospital walls, bringing consequences they had never anticipated. They were led out of the room, leaving me alone with the neurosurgeon. "Are you ready, Maya?" he asked gently. I looked at him, my vision blurry with tears. I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. But I nodded. As they prepped me for surgery, a strange clarity cut through the fear. The MRI hadn't just revealed shattered bone. It had revealed the truth. It had provided irrefutable, physical evidence that my pain was real, that my body was broken. And in doing so, it had shattered the fragile, toxic foundation of everything my family had ever believed about me. I was not a baby. I was not dramatic. I was a girl with a broken back, fighting for her future with every ounce of strength she had left. Waking up from surgery was like swimming up through layers of thick, syrupy darkness. The first thing I was aware of was pain, a deep, bone-deep ache that was different from the sharp, electric agony of before. The second was the weight of the silence. I was in a private room, the lights dim. I looked down. My legs were still there, under the crisp hospital sheets, but they were still strangers to me. The void remained. The door opened softly, and my parents entered. They looked like they had aged a decade. My father's shoulders were slumped, his usual commanding presence shrunk to a mere man in a rumpled shirt. My mother's eyes were red raw. "Maya," my mother whispered, rushing to my side. "The surgery, the doctor said it went as well as it could. He's hopeful." I didn't say anything. I just looked at my father. He couldn't meet my gaze. He stared at a fixed point on the wall behind my head, his jaw working. "The police," he began, his voice rough. "They're talking to Child Protective Services. They think we neglected you." The word was a poison in his mouth. I found my voice, hoarse from the breathing tube. "You did." The simple statement hung in the air. My mother flinched. "Maya, we didn't know," she cried. "How could we have known? You've always been so fragile." "Fragile," I repeated, a cold fire igniting in my chest. "The ladder was broken, Mom. Dad knew it. I fell because a rung snapped. I couldn't move my legs, and Dad told me to walk it off. You told me I was ruining Kyle's party. That's not thinking I'm fragile. That's not caring if I broke." It was his birthday. My father exploded, finally looking at me, his eyes blazing with a defensive fury. "I didn't want a scene. I thought you were being dramatic, like that time with the appendicitis." The memory slammed into me. I was 14. I'd had crippling stomach pains for days. They'd called it a stomach bug, told me to stop faking for attention. It wasn't until I spiked a fever of 104 and started vomiting that they took me in. My appendix had ruptured. The surgeon told them another few hours, and it could have been fatal. "You almost let me die then, too," I said, my voice quiet and steady. The MRI didn't just show a broken back. It showed the history of every time you didn't believe me, every time you called me a baby, every time you chose Kyle's happiness over my well-being. That skin shattered everything you believed because it proved, once and for all, that you were wrong. My father looked as if I had struck him. The fight went out of him, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell. He sank into the chair by the bed, his head in his hands. The following days were a whirlwind of physical therapists, neurologists, and a steady stream of social workers. My world, once confined to the four walls of my family's home, was now populated by people who listened,
who believed me,
who saw my pain not as an inconvenience, but as a problem to be solved. Officer Miller and the CPS caseworker interviewed me multiple times. I told them everything. Not just about the fall, but about the years of emotional neglect, the constant invalidation, the favoritism. I spoke, and for the first time, I felt heard. The consequences began to land. Kyle, confronted with the seriousness of the situation, broke down and admitted to the police that he knew the ladder was unstable. He'd even joked about it with his friends before I climbed it. My mother was forced into individual therapy. My father, faced with the potential of criminal charges for child endangerment, had to confront the man he had been. A month after the accident, I was transferred to a specialized rehabilitation center. I was learning how to live in this new body. I learned to transfer from my bed to a wheelchair, to navigate a world not built for me. The sensation in my legs had returned in patches, a tingling, sometimes painful pins and needles feeling that the doctors called a good sign, but walking was still a distant, uncertain dream. My parents visited, their interactions with me now cautious, filled with a newfound and fragile respect. The old dynamic was broken. They could no longer dismiss me. The evidence was right there, in the wheelchair, in the metal braces that now fused my spine. One afternoon, my father came alone. He sat with me in the rehab garden, the sun warm on our faces. "I was wrong," he said, the words seeming to cost him a great effort. "About everything. I thought I was making you strong. I thought I was teaching you not to be weak. But all I did was teach you that you couldn't rely on me." His voice broke. "I am so sorry, Maya. I failed you." I looked at this broken man, this giant of my childhood who had shrunk to human size. The anger was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but it was no longer all-consuming. "Apologies don't fix my spine, Dad," I said softly. "But they're a start." The MRI had revealed the unbreakable truth, not just of my fractured vertebra, but of my own spirit. They had tried to tell me I was broken, that I was weak. But lying on that driveway, surrounded by their disbelief, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. In the roaring silence of the MRI, I had faced my deepest fear. And in the long, painful days of rehab, I was building a new life, one on my own terms. I was Maya Evans. I was a survivor. And my story was no longer theirs to write.